Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to talk to you guys a little bit about knee wraps and how knee wraps snap your shit up so that people actually understand where I'm coming from here. So let me put on my +5 cap of weaponsmithing, do a little crafting, and the cap doesn't just make me better at my weaponsmithing and crafting, it makes me a goddamn sexual tyrannosaurus. Bunch of slack-jawed faggots up in here. Alright, now that being said, my terrible Jesse Ventura imitation aside, let's jump on this. Let's talk about it. Now, knee wraps, they snap your shit up. And I'm still surprised that anyone even debates this or doesn't understand this at this point. I mean, this is so old that it's still shocking that you're seeing guys on YouTube teaching this. First thing we need to look at, we'll get into a minute of how they actually injure you on their own, even if you're not feeling pain. But I want to reiterate a point that needs to be made over and over and over. A lot of guys use wraps and sleeves of various type because they claim it alleviates pain in their tendons or their joints. Now, you don't want to do that on a joint that moves. It's one thing if it's in a mobile joint, like your wrist. And even then, there are certain exercises you don't want to do that on. But chest presses is probably okay. Now, that being said, knees, elbows, things like that, wrapping them or sleeving them up because you're feeling pain in them is the worst idea ever. And anyone who tells you to do that or who does it themselves, you need to run from their advice. They do not know what they're doing. They do not know what they're talking about. They're going to hurt you and they're eventually going to hurt themselves. And the reason for that, your tendons and joints should not hurt as a result of weight training. Proper weight training should make your connective tissue and your joints stronger, healthier, more mobile. If it's causing irritation or pain, you are working that joint in a bad way excessively or with too much workload. And the same with tendons. You're putting an improper amount of stress on them that's causing inflammation. You're either pushing them too hard or you're training them in a way or in an angle that is causing inflammation. That will eventually lead to tendonitis, and it could eventually cause maybe inflammation and tendonitis that you can't reverse, that you're stuck with for years. Even when you quit doing the incorrect movement. What the wraps and the sleeves do is sometimes they put extra pressure and heat on the area that makes it stop hurting while you're actually doing the movement. The problem is that it doesn't actually remove the negative stimulation. The actual damage and wear being caused is not being reduced in any way. You're just blunting the pain effect. It's like taking a little minor localized painkiller while you're stabbing yourself or cutting yourself, right? So you're injuring yourself in some way and you're taking something to blunt the pain effect while you continue so that you can continue to do the painful, damaging thing that continues to damage your body. Now that's fine if it's a surgeon doing something that you need, but if you're doing it to yourself with some silly training method, that's really problematic. And so what ends up happening, it allows you to continue to do the thing that's injuring you longer. Well, what's the result of that? Long-term injury. You get more injured, you get more hurt, you get more inflamed. You can eventually cause things to snap or break or build up scar tissue or tendonitis in a way that you don't fully recover from. So using this as a band-aid fix so that you can continue to do something really bad and damaging to yourself doesn't really make a lot of sense now, does it? When you really think about it from that perspective. And that's the thing. Guys don't ever stop and think, hey, I shouldn't keep doing this. If it's hurting me, maybe it's causing injury, maybe it's causing damage, maybe I need to change what I'm doing. Instead, they just try to find ways to mask the pain by either restricting blood flow or getting something tight on there that puts pressure against it. Well, that doesn't stop the damage. It just temporarily eases the pain. You know, again, undesirable. You don't take a painkiller so that you can cut deeper on yourself. And so you shouldn't be trying to stop localized pain so you continue to do something that's damaging a joint or a tendon. Now, knee wraps themselves, in addition to that aspect of it, are also damaging in their own right. Because what you are effectively doing, you are wrapping a joint with tension around it that has a patella. So if you look at the joint, think about the way the knee joint works. You've got your bones that meet together at the joint and you have a patella in front of it, right? You've got your kneecap, which is kind of a free-floating bone. What ends up happening is that when you put on a knee wrap and you squat with it or do a leg press or anything else, you're usually putting a tremendous amount of weight and load on there. And because you're wrapping it up, when your knee bends and you're under all that load, all that weight loads against the elasticity of that wrap, right? And it puts pressure, inward pressure. And as it compresses, it's putting a torque behind the knee because it balls up a little bit behind your knee. So it's putting a shearing stress separately back there while it grinds that patella into the actual joint. Because if you think about it, I mean, just wrap yourself up with a knee wrap sometime, or just look at someone using one and look at the forces involved, and you realize that you're putting two types of damage on your knee joint. You're putting a shearing stress behind the knee, because it's almost like putting a ball, because it balls up back there, and it's almost like a ball being put behind your knee joint. Now that can actually cause its own type of minor damage to the joint over time. So you've got that to deal with, and then you have to deal with the fact that it puts all that pressure, pulls the front further back, because it's wrapping up back there and it's already wrapped tight, and it's pulling it backwards and putting even more pressure against that patella while you bend, and you're exposing that joint to the patella while grinding the patella with all that pressure and force against the actual joint. That bone is grinding against it. It's not naturally meant to do that. That's not the job of your patella, to grind against the knee joint. There's no situation where you would do that in the real world other than maybe walking on your knees for long distances. Well, if you were to walk on your knees, if your knees bent for long distances, it would cause damage, right? It's going to hurt you. It could damage the joint over time if you were to do it repeatedly. So you wouldn't want to do that. That's the only situation where you would do that, and it would hurt. And anywhere in the wild or in our natural environment, we wouldn't do that because it would hurt. It'd be stupid. You wouldn't force yourself to do it because you would know that it's injuring you. Well, that's the only other time where you would do something like that. This is an artificially created environment to where it's putting that stress against it. Well, that damages the joint. It can damage the patella, it can build up scar tissue on the backside of the patella, and build up scar tissue in that joint from the bone grinding against it in an unnatural way, over and over and over, week after week, month after month, year after year. You're grinding and grinding and grinding there. Well, that's going to build up scar tissue all between the joint and the patella. And if you think about the way the knee joint bends and opens up, the joint opens up there and that patella is grinding against it. That's going to build scar tissue inside the joint, because it's doing that grinding when the knee is totally bent and that joint is more exposed to the patella. So you're actually building scar tissue to the part that would be inside the joint when your leg is straight. Now, what situation do any of you want to be in where you think it's a good idea to build scar tissue up inside your knee joint? It isn't. That's never a good thing. That is an injury. That will snap you up. That is an actual injury and damage in its own right. So, who should be using knee sleeves? People who compete with them. You compete in a sport, most people who compete in sports at a serious level, who are really, really serious about being the best, don't really care if they're crippled the rest of their life. Most champions don't really give a fuck if they die or not, as long as they win. And we know that from psychological evaluations and questions given to championship winning athletes. Most champions, or people who are close to being champions, would trade their life. They're willing to die to become a champion. So they don't really give a fuck about losing their knee mobility and having pain in their knees the rest of their life. They don't care about that. They care about winning. So that's a totally different animal. Most of you guys aren't trying to be world champions at anything. You're not competing at anything at a high level that allows you to use a knee wrap. Why would you do it? Mainly so that you can squat a little more weight. But is it really building more muscle? No, it's not building more muscle, because you're squatting the weight using an external object that stores energy inside of it. What's helping you lift the weight and get the weight started at the bottom of a squat with a knee wrap is the actual knee wrap itself. The knee wrap is doing that extra work for the extra weight you're lifting, not your muscles. Because that energy, weight is being compressed into it as you come down. You're compressing kinetic energy into the joint. Well, if you're pressing kinetic energy into the joint, that's energy that the muscles don't have to produce. The weight and gravity are producing that on the way down. So it's not your muscles helping you lift the extra weight. So how's that beneficial to anyone who's not trying to lift maximum weights in a competition? There's no advantage. There's no size advantage and no strength advantage. There's only damage to your joint. That's the only advantage you're getting, and that's not an advantage at all. That's an injury. That hurts you. So at a certain point, guys need to learn to set their ego aside with this stuff and step back and realize that these knee joints, or these knee sleeves, aren't doing anything beneficial for you other than helping you blunt pain so that you can injure yourself further and lift more weight than you're capable of lifting using a competitive device that is just over time going to injure you. It's an ego thing. It's an ego thing that lets guys lift more weight. And again, I'm not talking about the guys in a competitive environment because they're competing against other guys using the same device. That's a level playing field. But it allows guys to lift more weight than they're capable of lifting. And it allows them to train and mask some of the pain of improper training methods because they don't want to admit that they're training wrong and they don't know how to actually train. So either way, the only reason guys are using knee sleeves is about ego. This falls back into the category of ego lifting because ego lifting is when you let your ego get the best of you and you do something incorrectly to lift more weight so that you can feel better about yourself while simultaneously hurting yourself, because that's all they do. And knee wraps have no place outside of a competitive environment where they're used as a lifting aid, because again, all they do is injure you and snap you up. They really have no place in anyone's routine who's concerned about their longevity of training, their health, their fitness, and their ability to have a healthy, strong, fit body for many years to come. They have no place there. None at all. So when people say things like, oh, I think you're exaggerating, you're overrating it, knee wraps aren't that bad. Yeah, they are. They injure people with no positive redeeming values for those people. They do nothing beneficial for the people who use them other than hurt them and boost their ego. I don't think it's exaggerating to say then that they're bad and that no one should be using them. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.